I'm Don Letts, aka the Rebel Dread. Bob came into my life when I needed him. I was lucky enough to see him play his legendary live show at the Lyceum in London in 1975. I walked out of that gig a changed man. So much so that I jumped in my car and followed the band's coach back to their hotel. Next thing you know, I'm sitting in Bob's living room watching him reason with the UK Rasta elders. After he'd out-reasoned and out-smoked everyone, he looked around the room and saw me sitting there with a little bag of weed. But it was good weed, so we made a connection. Fast forward to London, 1977. I went round to collect some money he owed me, wearing punk rock clothes. And Bob exclaimed, "Don Letts is way I deal with. You look like one of them nasty blood clot punk rocker." Now, Bob had been reading the tabloid press, and they painted a very negative view of the movement. I stood my ground and defended my friends as like-minded rebels. 3 months later, a better informed Bob was moved to write the song Punky Reggae Party.
My name is Marcia Griffiths. I'm a solo artist and I'm also a member of I3, the backing vocals for Bob Marley. I met Bob Marley at Studio One, Jamaica's Motown. When I walked in there, I met Scratch, Lee Perry, and he was giving me an introduction. Just from a distance, he was pointing out Bob Marley, Peter Tosh, and Bunny Wailer. Those three brothers was the three persons that you had to pass a test with. They hardly smile. Those eyes would always be watching you. Bob and I did an original song that he wrote called Oh My Darling. I was a little shaky because I don't know anyone around. I went through and recorded the song and I felt happy about the song as well. Sitting down to have conversations was where I started to find out how deep these three brothers were and how far ahead they were looking.
My name is Chris Salewicz. I'm a writer and I wrote Bob Marley, The Untold Story. February 1979, I'm in Kingston, Jamaica, and I go out to 56 Hope Road, Bob's headquarters. I see some tough-looking youth. Then a car, black-tinted windows and a neatly open flag drives in. Bob gets out. I introduce myself. He gives me a fresh spliff he's just rolled. And then he says, "We have to go somewhere now," and goes to this bus. Come with us. And I say, "Where are we going?" He says, "Gun court, Mark. Let's hear about a man named Lockup, Michael Bernard. He was in jail for something that he was believed generally not to have done." We get to the intimidating gun court and we go up to the governor's office. Bob is very humble, very self-effacing. There's no raised voices. And I realize it's just to make it known that Michael Bernard has not been forgotten about. Then we leave. Bob says, "Hang around." I'm there for about 3 weeks. It wasn't easy being Bob Marley. It's not just writing music. There's a whole other cultural thing going on.
My name is David Rodigan. I'm a reggae DJ. I met Bob Marley walking up the staircase at Island Records. Bob Marley was walking down the staircase. I jumped protocol and said, "Excuse me, Mr. Marley, I have a reggae show on Capital Radio. I would be greatly honored if you would consider coming on the show." He smiled and said, "Okay." He then said, "Would you like to hear something that I just finished recording?" Of course I would. So we went back up the stairs, where he took a cassette out of his denim jacket pocket, placed it in the cassette player and pressed play. And at the end of listening to this song, he said to me, "So, as a radio DJ, do you think that mix is suitable for FM radio in New York or AM radio?" And I said, "That sounds like a good FM mix." And he said, "Okay, I'll bring it with me tomorrow night. You'll have it as a world exclusive." And the following night, he turned up at Capital Radio, and at the end of the interview, he said, "I've got this world exclusive, just finished recording it," and it was Could You Be Loved?
My name is Adrian Boot. I'm a photographer. I used to live in Jamaica. I was a teacher, and while I was in Jamaica, I did a lot of photography. In fact, I published a book. Then I came back to London, and I was working very closely with Island Records. They sent me to an apartment to photograph Bob Marley. It was a fairly shabby apartment, and Bob was there, so were most of the bands. They were a bit glum. They'd run out of herb, I think. Coincidentally, I actually had a bag of weed on me, which disappeared within a few minutes. Then the atmosphere changed. Everybody was laughing. It was much more cordial than it was when I walked in the room, and I was able to do my photographs. I got to know Bob Marley a lot better, of course, because I saw Bob Marley on many, many occasions after that. He's a legend, obviously.
name is Lee Jaffe. I began working with Bob Marley and the Wailers in 1973. I remember hearing Trenchtown rock for the first time at a shack along a winding mountain road, driving to the tiny village 9 Mile where Bob was born, his voice resounding from a jukebox, seeming to float through the lush green mountains and valleys. I must have been shaking. I was so blown away. Bob had gone around to the back of the shop to look at some herb and roll a split, and I just wanted to hear that record over and over again. Then he came around to the front of the store, saw me, and said, "What happened to you, Ma?" I opened my mouth to try and say something, but it just stayed open, and Bob joked, "Look like a duppy got you, Ma," meaning I looked like a ghost possessed me. Finally, I said, "That's the greatest record I ever heard." And he threw his arm around my shoulder. He just started to laugh, and we were both laughing, and he handed me a spliff, and he said, "Take this spliff, Lee Jaffe. You need a good draw to scare them duppy away."